On this week's episode, we're going to be talking about Cairo, the dog that helped catch Osama bin Laden. This is going to be a read and react, so sit tight because I have a feeling it's going to be a good one. Let's get into it next. All right, we're going to go ahead and get this week's episode going. Let me just adjust my microphone here to get a little better. Hey guys, I'm Jake from the Learn, Laugh, Bark podcast, also OnDog Training Academy. We are an online dog training company. We have courses, webinars, workshops, and we do one-on-one virtual lessons. So if that's something that interests you, check out ondogtrainingacademy.com. So at the end of every month, I like to do a story about a dog. And this is one that I've known about for a long time, but I never really got into the details of it because I just didn't, I guess. I don't know. And as I started to research this one, I'm like, I really want to talk about this. I'm going to look up this story. I want to learn about Cairo. Cairo was the dog that helped catch Osama bin Laden. And once I started getting into it and started really reading through some of this stuff, and this story that I'm going to show you is an article from the New York Post, and I'm going to be connecting this article to in the description, so you guys can go read this story yourself. And we're going to read through it pretty much together. I started to read through it and I went, hold on. I want to read and react to this kind of as you guys would if you don't know the story that much. And the reason for that is just because it started to get emotional to me, because the dog in this story is Cairo, who's a Belgian Malinois. And if you don't know, that is our breed of choice. We love these dogs. They are amazing animals. And just reading about some of the stuff that happened about Cairo and just Cairo's life leading into the day that he was going after Osama bin Laden is just really amazing, I guess, to say otherwise. So again, this is a New York Post story. We're going to read and react to this. And the story is called Inside Story of Cairo, the dog that helped catch Osama bin Laden. And this is going to go into talking about his handler, Chesney, and Cairo himself. So I'm going to go start reading it, and then I'll be throwing in my own little things here and there. So we'll go ahead and start. So when Navy SEAL Will Chesney, we're going to call him Chesney from now on, first met a military working dog named Cairo, he didn't know this canine would be the one. I mean, if you own a Malinois, you shortly figure out these dogs are amazing and this is the one. But he didn't know yet. And he didn't realize this was going to be a fearless warrior with a soft side, an attack dog who would know the difference between a baby and a bad guy. The lone non-human U.S. soldier to raid Osama bin Laden's compound in 2011. Back in the fateful day of 2008, so we're going to go back a few years before he actually went after Osama bin Laden, Chesney decided to become a dog handler. He took his first instruction seriously because these dogs weren't like pets. Of course not. These were lethal weapons. These dogs are trained. So if you guys don't know, I do a sport called Mondio Ring where we train dogs to go. There's a lot of obedience and jumps and everything, and they also go after decoys, I should say, in bite suits. So I kind of understand where he's coming from with these. Where these aren't just dogs. These aren't just pets. There's a little bit more to them. But despite the warning, handlers are dog people, and they know how profound this bond is. As Chesney writes, he has a book out called No Ordinary Dog. It's his memoir of life and military service with Chesney. Cairo was not my first choice. Might as well be honest about that. And I don't blame him. You look at Mal's and you're like, holy crap. In fact, it was a dog named Bronco that Chesney wanted. Bronco was friendly. Cairo was standoffish. Bronco sometimes wanted to play. Cairo was all about work. Malinois love working. Yet after 2 weeks of training, even as Chesney realized that Cairo was the exceptional dog, he was still resistant. You're getting Cairo, a program director told him. He's the right dog for you. Sometimes you don't get, especially for this military stuff, you don't get to pick. You need to figure out what team's going to be the best to work together. And even if it's not the one you prefer, well, if it's the best one for you, they're going to put the best one for you. So Chesney shrugged. He says, okay, cool. Off they went to a 7-week training camp in California where the bond they bonded hard and fast. And Malinois are phenomenal at this. The bond that you establish with them, it's going to happen super quick. By the second night, they were sharing a bed, and Chesney writes, though I do recall pushing him off in the middle of the night for being such an aggressive snuggler and blanket hog. Yeah, they want to be on top of you when it comes to cuddling. Everything they do is intense, including loving you, is what I like to say. Cairo learned how to attack a target, to bite and release on command, to skydive, to sniff out weapons, and improvise explosive devices, to move quickly and quietly through unforgiving terrain, building up protective calluses on its paws. I mean, you think about your pet dog at home. I mean, are they going to really be able to run across some of the stuff that they had to deal with in like Afghanistan and stuff? Oof, that is some rough terrain. He said, I couldn't wait to see him in action, Chesney said. They were deployed to Afghanistan in 2009. Chesney was most concerned with how Cairo would recognize a target, a true threat that needed to be eliminated, and ignore human shields, almost always women and children. A lot of time, you yell at people who come out of houses, and Chesney says the post, and men and women will leave their infants inside, maybe hoping that they will get hurt or the babies will be killed so they can use that as propaganda basically against them. And that's super sad, by the way. That is extremely sad way to fight. First time Chesney saw Cairo attack was under similar circumstances. They were on a nighttime raid to clear a house, but unbeknown to every human soldier, an infant baby lay bundled inside alone, hidden in a pile of clothes and blankets. You can't see that much with night vision goggles, Chesney says. He watched as Cairo sniffed this inert pile, then calmly walked to another room and pounced on a male target, biting him so savagely to nearly severing his arm. So this dog was trained to be brutal, but went right past this baby that was in this pile of blankets. So obviously the dog knows the difference between a threat and not a threat. Cairo, for all of his training, had not been taught the difference between babies and adults. I don't quite know how to explain the fact that he didn't harm the child, Chesney writes, except to say that Cairo was indeed a special dog. He knew right from wrong, good from bad. I always like to say that kids put out an energy. Now, typically this energy is hyper and crazy, but I don't think it comes off typically as aggressive. So a dog who's like, are you bad? Do I need to hurt you? I think a lot of dogs can tell. This is not something that, especially infants, this is not something that's going to be a threat to me. So I don't have to worry about it. Anyways, not long after the night of June 30th, 2009, the SEALs engaged in combat with heavy armed insurgents who fled into a tree-lined ridge. Cairo, from a great distance, picked up their scent. Chesney unhooked the leash and sent him off. That's got to be terrifying, right? Like, I mean, police dogs, everything. When you have your partner, basically, well, it is your partner. It's not basically. This is your partner. And you just unhook the leash and you say, go do your job. This gives me stress just thinking about this. Like, I'm sending you into danger when me personally, like, my whole life is about protecting my dog. Like, I don't want to put my dog in harm's way, but these dogs are trained to be in harm's way. That doesn't make it easy when you unhook the leash, but still. So the canine easily cleared a 4-foot stone wall and disappeared into the trees. Shots were fired. Panicked, Chesney calls for Cairo to come back. Cairo did not come back. Chesney moved towards the trees, towards the gunfire that was still happening. Cairo, he yelled. Come on, buddy. That come on, buddy right there got me. Like, this is where I stopped and I'm like, I got to react, because come on, buddy. Like, you know, when someone's like, come on, buddy, like, you know, there's that panic and that, like, you almost know what just happened. So Chesney braced himself. Then, about 100 feet away, he saw a small figure emerge. Chesney shouted, now loud enough to be heard over the gunfire, Cairo. And Cairo lurched towards him. Chesney then collapsed. Chesney ran to him. So the dog was coming to him and couldn't quite make it and just collapsed over. Cairo had been shot in the chest and front leg. He was bleeding out and struggling to breathe, his eyes closing. The call went over the radio. FWIA. I don't know if that's... basically stands for Friendly Wounded in Action. Because there's no distinction between a human and a canine. Cairo's considered a SEAL, and that's what it is. A combat medic rushed over to help. Chesney watched as the medic pushed piles of gauze into the holes as blood kept gushing out. It came to the medevac. In came the medevac. Cairo was loaded into the copter, flown by Chesney. Once they reached base, a team of doctors and nurses, not veterinarians, but doctors, combat surgeons, performed emergency surgery on Cairo. So kudos to them. I don't know if they had any training in this or not, but kudos to them for being able to do this and save this dog's life, even though they're not vets. They're just combat surgeons. Not just, but they're combat surgeons, right? So, which is crazy. Chesney did not leave Cairo's side for a moment. He later learned that Cairo had struggled to make it to Chesney's sightline, wounded and bleeding heavily, unable to clear that tall wall that Cairo had went over originally. The first night, Chesney laid on the chilly tile floor in Cairo's room, his arm gently slung across the dog's back, unable to sleep, worried about Cairo would pass away and not hear Chesney say how much he loved him. The next morning, Cairo gave Chesney a lick, and Chesney knew the dog was going to make it. "Hey, buddy," Chesney said, "welcome back." Like that right there, it just sort of hits you. Like, it sounds silly to some, but not to me. But like, whether your dog understands what you say to them, you being able to let your dog know you love them and say goodbye if you need to is something that not everybody gets to do with their dogs, and it's tough. It's definitely tough. All right, so we're going to fast forward here. So now March 2011, Cairo, now 6 years old, is about to retire. Chesney, hard as it was, began to distance himself. Then he got the order, pack your gear, something's come up. So he was prepping his dog to retire, starting to separate more, because I don't think that he was able to keep them. I'll have to read on and find out, I suppose, like everybody else. But that's something that came up was them going after Osama bin Laden. Cairo was off the retirement track, and when the team sent to North Carolina to train at a full-scale replica of bin Laden's compound, every SEAL was told to get their affairs in order. They knew this was going to be a pretty big fight. Chesney was more worried about Cairo than himself. The chances of that the compound wasn't tripwired with bombs were remote. Cairo could very well be first fatally of what is now called Operation Neptune Spear. On May 2nd, 2011, Chesney sat on the floor of a Black Hawk helicopter with Cairo. Cairo was wearing a Kevlar vest, night vision goggles between his legs, headed with 11 other Navy SEALs toward, I can't even pronounce it, Abbottabad? That sounds right. Another Black Hawk flew in tandem until they peeled off and crash landed inside the compound. The copter Chesney was in landed perfectly. He and Cairo jumped out, and Chesney unleashed Cairo to search the perimeter for bombs and escape tunnels. Remember, this dog was also trained for explosives and escape tunnels. As SEALs invaded, after 2 laps, Cairo and Chesney entered the main house. Together, they cleared the first floors quickly and were climbing onto the third when another SEAL passed them on his way down. "I don't think they need the dog," he told Chesney. "It's over." It wasn't really. Bin Laden was dead, but the downed Black Hawk had woken up the neighborhood. Cairo kept the crowd outside at bay while SEALs grabbed what intel they could, documents, computers, videotapes, photos, then blew up the downed Black Hawk and extracted themselves from the site. Yeah, they have to blow the helicopter up because they don't want it to be used against them later on, and the information and technology. 36 hours later, the SEALs were back in the U.S. meeting with President Obama. Until that moment, Obama hadn't known that Cairo existed. He was floored. "I want to meet this dog," he said. "Every SEAL got a silver star for the bin Laden raid, except Cairo." Well, that's bullshit. "It was a disappointment to me," Chesney tells the Post. "He was every bit as important in the mission as anyone else. He risked just as much." You could almost, the dog doesn't quite understand what they're doing. They don't understand the cause. They understand their job, but they don't necessarily understand the cause. But yeah, it kind of sucks. Like, the dog should have gotten it, right? Like, they should have. This story has a happy ending and a sad one. Well, Cairo became so famous there was talk he might never be able to leave base again. Chesney, meanwhile, was redeployed. He was still a dog handler, but without Cairo, nothing was okay. He began exhibiting signs of post-traumatic stress disorder, anxiety, depression, migraines, heavy drinking. His short-term memory was shot. He suddenly had an explosive temper. He was prescribed drugs, a lot of them. Nothing worked. He was 28 years old, and only one therapy helped, visiting Cairo. I felt like he needed me, Chesney writes. I sure needed him. Yeah, I mean, when you create a bond like that, with a dog, and especially like the bond I have with my dog is super strong, my Malinois. But when you go into combat, I got to imagine like the bond you get with your team, with your brothers, with your sisters, that is huge. But with your dog, I mean, I could totally understand. 2 years later, in fall of 2013, Chesney heard that Cairo was going to be retired. He also heard at least 2 other guys wanted to adopt him. Chesney was so terrified he began planning ways to kidnap Cairo. He bought a motorcycle with a sidecar for Cairo. He dreamed of nights on the couch watching movies and eating steak together. It took nearly a year, stagnant bureaucracy, and reams of paperwork for Chesney to get the call Cairo was his. Thank God. But this happy reunion wouldn't last long. Just a few months later, Cairo, old and battle-scarred and tired, deteriorated quickly. In April 2nd, 2015, Cairo was put down. Chesney wept as he held Cairo's paw. To this day, Chesney has the blood-stained harness Cairo was wearing the night he was shot. The same harness he wore in the bin Laden raid. He had Cairo cremated and keeps his ashes in a canister with Cairo's paw print on it. Those ashes have a special place in Chesney's home. He has other canisters for the screws and metal plates inserted in Cairo after he was wounded in action. It still bothers Chesney that Cairo never was awarded a medal. He's such a big part of history. That said, he's getting a book. That's better than a silver star. Spread his message, spread his love. Like that to me, like the story of this dog is better than any medal. And that is the end, guys. That is the end of the story. It's definitely tough. Like, you know, when you lose a dog, it's like they've done studies on this. The bond you get with your dogs is like you bonding with a person, like a loved one. And when you lose, like a human, I should say, and when you lose a dog, it has the effect of you losing a person, losing someone close. Your mourning is the same. Your sadness is the same, arguably, if not worse, because sometimes we bond more with dogs than we do with people. So yeah, this story is sad, but this is a very common story when it comes to military working dogs. They are weapons first, dogs second. And thank God that they're getting more rights and more things like that now. I know as like for law enforcement stuff, if you shoot or kill a police dog, you can be charged with killing an officer. That law, I don't know if it's nationwide or if it's just certain states, but should be nationwide. But yeah, I mean, this hits home a lot. I mean, like, we've dealt with people with PTSD. We've dealt we do stuff with service dogs. We understand the power these dogs can have and how being separated from them can be extremely stressful to us and the dogs. So I'm glad he was able to be with his dog, even if it was short-lived. In the end, he was able to adopt the dog. And yeah, just like with people, your past catches up to you. And in this situation, it was physically, right? Like, that dog had put his body through so much, being shot, the training, the bite work, all of the stuff that's hard on your back and neck and teeth and face and paws and tail, everything. It just catches up. And I've seen a lot of working dogs deteriorate just like this. Shortly after retirement, just because normal aging of dogs gets sped up when it comes to these working style dogs. And it's incredibly sad. It's definitely a sad story. But he was able to help get Osama bin Laden. He helped out his handler, saved his handler's life. It sounded like his handler was going through a lot of stuff and is still around now because he was able to at least spend that last little bit with his dog. So guys, that is the story of Cairo. And I really hope you enjoyed the story. Yeah, it's not necessarily the most happiest ending. Or it is, it isn't. Highs and lows. But I mean, this is the life of military working dogs. If you ever get a chance to meet them, donate to them, help them, police and military working dogs need our support. These Kevlar vests can be expensive and everything. And so being able to donate or supply or do something, anything you can to help these canines be more protected, I think is something we could all do more of. So guys, I really hope this was helpful. I don't even know if it's helpful. It's just a good story. If you like this, we do this at the end of every month. So make sure to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, where this podcast does get put up. Also gets put up on anywhere you want, anywhere you find your podcasts, we are typically at. So if you found this information, if you found this entertaining, make sure you leave a review. We're going to be doing more like this. Like I said, at the end of every month, we do a story. Sometimes they have happy endings, sometimes sad endings, sometimes there's a message in there somewhere, and we try to find it. But guys, that is it. So thank you guys so much for listening. And as always, we'll see you next week. Good dog.